who are businesses, stakeholders, what is business there for? And as it says on the right-hand side, I think about what's going to engage interest, what's going to get these conversations going, what's going to get students excited about choosing this subject and talking about it to all their friends so that even more people want to do it. And that's, an obvious one is to start talking about the businesses they know, the businesses their families are involved in, what they exist, how, what's the difference between a primary, secondary sector type thing, what's the difference between a company and a sole trader, start thinking about business plans and so on, and entrepreneurs. Those are interesting areas. And that's quite a chunk of stuff that's a backdrop to the rest of the GCSE. And then you could then start looking at, okay, what influences the decisions? And so we start to look at environmental issues, or we start to look at economic issues or technology, which is creating the world in which we operate. And then there's lots of opportunities then to relate to the world around us and bring in news stories and what have you read today, and start your business journal and your business diary and all that sort of stuff. And students, there should be a buzz going on. And then you can start to delve into the functions themselves. Again, depends how you like to work, but it's quite common to go, let's look at the outside, let's look at what business is, let's look at the outside world, and then let's dig into what goes on internally.
Yeah.
Some people prefer to go, let's look at the internal and then start seeing what goes on in the outside world and how that affects the internal. That's up to you. But given that real world and influences are on both papers, it's a logical starting point maybe to focus on those. So you could do real world influences, operations. Let's get stuck into what businesses actually do and why they exist and how they do what they do. And then logically you could match that with human resources, because that's what paper one's about. So let's look at the operations of business, let's look at the people requirement, let's look at the training requirement. If I want to do these approaches to quality, how does that influence my people needs? If I want to switch from job to flow, how does that influence people? So there's interrelations there that are quite interesting. And then you can move on to marketing and finance for the rest of that second year. Sorry, that says year 10, that will be year 11 now. Marketing's quite a chunky area, so that might make sense. You need quite a few weeks to get that covered. Obviously, with all of this, I wouldn't, the more comfortable you are with the spec and the material, the more you can touch on things as you go. I mean, finance, it would be odd that the first time you ever mention finance is towards the end of the second year. You will have talked about profits and costs already. So this is beginning to pick up some of that stuff. When you talk about marketing, it would be odd if the first time you talk about customers is when you get into year 11. Clearly, when you're talking about operations, you're thinking about the scale of demand and the nature of demand and how fragmented, So these things do feel free, obviously, to talk across. Because that's what makes the thing so interesting. For AS, again, sorry, it says year 10, please ignore that. So for AS curriculum planning, business and markets is quite chunky. And that's again, the intro stuff about what our business is, what do businesses do, what are businesses there for, what are their objectives, and then quite a lot of that marketing area. Then perhaps, and that's paper one. And I'm assuming term one is your longest term. So paper one, mainly in term one, and then move towards the other functions. So the next are paper two, ops, HR, and finance, and do those maybe term 2.5 of term 3, depending on when your holidays and things fall and how long your terms are. Okay, so we've got content, we've got to divide it up.
cash flow
We've got the spec as our go-to point.
है
At all points, it's the spec that matters, and we're using that to divide up our teaching time. We are alert to assessment objectives. We either talk to students about them or not. I actually do quite happily talk to them about AO1, AO2, AO3, so that they're familiar with the language and they know what they're trying to do. But we need some knowledge. We definitely need to apply to context. We need to develop arguments, and we need to make judgments. And that's either part of AO3 GCSE or a separate skill at AO4 at A level. So if we're doing multiple choice, then we are learning things. We are testing AO1 lovely. Multiple choice are great.
शुरू से दोबारा करो.
Use them a lot. They're great starters. They're great kind of recaps. Do spend time exploring if they got the answer wrong, why. That's normally fascinating. And there's normally something interesting going on. It's normally not, I have no idea. There's normally quite an interesting thought process going on.
You don't need to convert in months.
Exploring, and we'll take you down some interesting routes. So very, very good questions that enable you to assess the understanding.
वो नहीं निकालना, period बताना
If
होता
you
है.
look at, if they haven't got it right, what's the misunderstanding, and to explore that a bit further. Okay, so then we will have some of these questions kind of state and explain these two markers. They're very knowledge based. So what we're looking for there is just what is the point, what is the factor, what is the benefit, what is the reason, and then some basic developments. That's looking really at what's the depth of their understanding. Key things there: use of time. You don't need a lot of time here. You don't need to repeat the question. You do just need, if it says state two characteristics, it's just here's one, here's another. Make sure they're different. So I don't know, if it's be innovative and have new ideas, those are two similar. So we need two different characteristics. Because some people have big writing, we tend to kind of make sure there's enough writing space for somebody with big writing. So characteristic one, we only really need one word or one short sentence, but we've put 2 lines in there just in case somebody writes with huge writing. They don't have to fill it. So 2 marks is very quick. Identify and explain one way a government can encourage enterprises to grow. This is the way they can do it, and I'll explain it. That could be quick. It doesn't need to take up 4 lines of writing. But what we've done is, as a kind of principle, if it's 2 marks, we tend to give 4 lines to allow people to have very big handwriting or cross things out or whatever. But if anything, you're trying to encourage concise answers for these. These are just knowledge. Do you know something, and can you tell us what it is? Then we get on to, we're into the case study, the items. These are broken up. So compared to some boards, they're much kind of shorter and chunked, to make it easier and more accessible. The minute you've got tables, I would say get excited, get students to get excited, because that's numbers. And with numbers, you can work stuff out and you can start to really show an insight into this business. The minute you're using these numbers and the 23 production faults, that's applied. That must be about this business. That's not general, that's not theory. So the minute we get tables and numbers and data, get stuck in. And I would say here, the key thing there is students get out the marker pens, circle, highlight, underline, do lots of things to show that they are relating their answer to HHE enterprises. The real kind of challenge is to avoid theoretical answers. So 10.1, using the information, calculate the average unit cost for HHE, they're going to go to that data and they're going to use that data. That will be applied, no problem. 10.2 needs to be how HHE might affect the environment, not how businesses in general. So they take their theoretical understanding, and they go back to the case, and they see how this business could affect the environment. And there's lots of answers there, you'll see. Those will be in the item. So it's going back to the item always to pull out what's in there that can be used. So your role, one of your roles is provide stimulus, use past papers or whatever, or case studies in the textbook to make sure there's a context. This question here is analyze how HHE benefits from high-end quality products, is not how does any business benefit, it's how HHE benefits. So you cannot answer that question without going back to the paper. None of us now can answer that question unless we've read about HHE. We go back to HHE, see a situation. Is it that they've got problems with customer satisfaction? Is it they've got problems with items being returned? I don't know. Let's find out. And then we produce a developed answer about that business. And you'll see here, it's about the quality of the analysis that matters. Notice here, it's about AO2 and AO3. So knowing lots about quality is not what we're assessing. Applying our understanding to HHE is what we're assessing. So it's not AO1, it's AO2 and AO3. Therefore, somebody who repeats, here are 20 good reasons about making high quality products, that's all theoretical, will probably get 0. because that's not applying to HHE and developing an argument. Doesn't say here, by the way, you need one argument or two arguments or three arguments. There's no hidden rules. It just says, is your analysis detailed? So you could argue, 1 point in depth about HHE is better than 25 theoretical points, which is just knowledge, which wouldn't get anything on that. Bigger questions. This is a typical one. Should we do something or not? Key question, recommend which supplier will be better for HHE. None of us on this call can answer that until we go back to the item and read about HHE. Is HHE interested in price? Is it interested in quality? Is it interested in environmental issues? I don't know. I'd need to go back and find out about that business. So business GCSE, business A-level is using knowledge. Again, look at that mark scheme. How good is your analysis? How good is your evaluation? Quality, 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 not number of points. Notice again, it's not AO1. It's using your understanding. So you're practicing with students. What does this mean in context? How do I develop the quality of thinking, not the number of things I'm thinking about? And I won't go through this, but it's exactly the same at AS. And levels of response is about quality. Okay. So resources and so on to support you. There are textbooks. These are specifically written for Oxford AQA. Most of the material on our spec is similar to other boards, but not all. And it's in a different format and it's cut up in different ways and there's a different emphasis. So you are safer using a book written for this particular specification. If you've got other resources, you can probably transfer them and move some of them across, but always go back to the spec to check how it's on this syllabus, how it's on the specification, and how much emphasis it's got, and how much detail it's got, and so on. Don't just transfer stuff without double checking. And textbook-wise, I say, these are written for this specification. Now, I'm going to tell you they're wonderful. I've written one of them, but however good a textbook is, it is still theory. There will be some case studies in there you can use. They're very useful. There will be some kind of multiple choice. There'll be lots of exercises you can use. That's where it begins to get interesting in terms of helping you to apply. A chapter in itself will be theoretical. So we're trying to say to students, you're trying to say to students, take the knowledge so you understand the sorts of things business think about when choosing a supplier, and then let's look at a situation to see which of those really matters. Let's look at the sorts of impacts that businesses can have on the environment. The book will help us with that. And then let's look at a particular business and what the key issue is for that business. So you've still got to take, using the case studies and the things in the books and using past papers, you've still got to do something with the knowledge. What we're not trying to do is just learn the chapter of the textbook. We're trying to use it as a starting point for our thinking. Schemes of work are there. They are, again, a useful starting point. The more you do this, the more you'll own it, and the more you'll begin to move things around according to your own interests and so on. But they're a useful starting point in terms of time allocation. And there are teacher guidance documents. So that's just making sure we're clear on what the command words are and what we require from them. The A-level one, I think, is particularly useful. By A2, there are a number of models and theories which are incredibly useful, but when they were first introduced in the UK as well as internationally, they were new, some of them, and therefore there's quite a lot of material there to help you and make sure that you understand what they are and the how you can use them in your teaching. So again, dip into those, but there should be some valuable material.
9.1 I think.
And then once you get going, there's a useful tool which is called Enhanced Results Analysis. That enables you to look at the performance of your students relative to, how are they doing on particular papers, how are they doing on particular types of questions. And that's just really useful to help inform your own teaching. We need to spend a bit more on calculations, or we need to spend a bit longer on the evaluation, because they're fine on the multiple choice, but actually when it gets to these 12 markers, weighing up one to the other, that's where we need to spend a bit more time. There are, again, if you go back to that resource section, You should have a login. If not, your exams officer has got a login. There's lots of stuff there. There's specimen papers, there's past papers, and that body is now building. So there's quite a lot of resources there. There are some, I think certainly for AS, there's some exemplar answers with some marking, so you can see how we use that levels approach, because that's key. I think that what we're trying to do is not focus on number of things, but focus on quality of argument.
अब net present value क्या होती
Developing
है?
for you and for students. Okay,
इन
write
सबको ऐड
something,
करोगे 25
sit
को
back,
माइनस कर दो.
think about it. What does it all add up to? What level have I reached with this? Is it reasonable or is it good? What's the difference between those? And so with training we can provide in that. Yeah, and you can see here more part papers, and right at the bottom you'll see this report on the exam. Do always dip into those. Common themes, as I've said, use of context, depth of analysis. So it's not students not knowing things,
8.9
it's
से लिख
how
दो.
they use what they know
ये
in
आपके
the
पैसे की
context of the
प्रेजेंट
question.
मतलब आपकी बचत है इस तरह की. देखो वैसे
Also
आपको
how
मिल रहा है
the
10,
depth
12,
of analysis and the
44
judgment.
minus 25.
Now
real
that's
में
all,
पैसा इतना
that's
बच
true
रहा
at
है, लेकिन
GCSE,
अगर हम
it's
उस
true at
पैसे को
AS, true at
डिस्काउंट
A2,
करें तो हमें रियल में
judgment is a
बचत
difficult thing. It is
$9.86.
a real differentiator, but working on
ये
that
होता है
ability
without
to
discount, without time value
compare
of many factors को
options
consider
and
करें.
choose between,
ये होता है
that's
time
a
value of money को
really
consider
important
करें. जैसे
skill
मैं
for
यहाँ
us.
पे maybe
And
20
really
लिखता हूँ, लेकिन
focusing, as
उसकी
I
real
say,
value क्या
on
है? 8.6.
not
तो ये वैल्यू ज्यादा
jumping from one
authenticated होती
argument
है.
to another argument to another argument.
तो
I mean,
ये आपके
what is
पैसे
the
की
argument you're
प्रोजेक्ट
making?
प्रेजेंट
Follow
वैल्यू
that
निकालेगा.
through
प्रेजेंट वैल्यू
in
का मतलब
depth
आपके पैसे को
in
डिस्काउंट
the
करके
context
उसकी
of the
प्रेजेंट
business. So
वैल्यू
I
निकालेगा.
would do quite a
आपके क्वेश्चन
few
कितने क्वेश्चन हैं?
exercises where you're asking them
There
to
are a lot
read
of
the
questions
item
about it.
and then pull out from that what are the
4
key
महीने आपने
features
ऐसे
of
गुजार
that
दिया.
item
मॉक भी आया, बिल्कुल
before
भी
they
आपको
write
पढ़ाई
anything.
को तो बिल्कुल
Now, in the
समझ नहीं.
case of AS, as I said to you, there aren't any case
और this
studies.
is the right
So
time.
what we're
अभी
doing there is
करोगे
that the
तो वरना तो ये
context is
सीधा
in the
हो
wording
जाएगा.
of the question.
अब
And is it a big business,
आपने क्या
small
करना है? अब
business?
आप देखो ना इसके
Is
पास
it a
में मिल जाएगा ना.
retailer? It's that. So it's the same exercise.
क्या क्या है
Before
इसकी?
you write, pull out for me something in there that
जो नहीं समझ आता
is
वैसे
useful
डिस्कस करो आप उसको.
context. Okay.
आपको दोबारा से
And
लेक्चर
then I'm
चाहिए,
going to hand
दोबारा से
over, I
बताओ
think,
मुझे.
just to talk about this. We mentioned it briefly, the plus and the EPQ.
Thank
ये
you very
आपका
much,
कहाँ
Andrew. That's been really helpful. So I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to the GCSE Plus and International EPQ or Extended
सारे देखो ये
Project
क्वेश्चन है.
Qualification. So
इनके
these
आंसर दिए
project qualifications are additional qualifications, but they can be taught alongside the business studies qualifications. So if your students are interested in
बस
more
इसको आज आप
independent
कर लेना,
learning,
ठीक है?
that would
अब
be
ये कल के दिन आपको
project
छुट्टी है, मैं
based
सारा ये लेके
and
जा रहा हूँ. यहाँ तक मैंने सुनना है फिर
further
से शेड्यूल
develop
डाल.
the skills, the
ठीक है, फिर
assessment objectives of analysis and
एवोल्यूशन से
evaluation
लेकर
that
सारा
Andrew
हर मेथड,
mentioned
हर चीज उसके
previously,
एडवांटेज,
then
डिसएडवांटेज,
the project
न्यूमेरिकल क्वेश्चन,
qualifications
ये
can be
सारे
very
कंप्लीट होने
useful
चाहिए.
to do that. They're
ठीक है,
available at,
चलो
as I
बस
say, the
फिर
GCSE
नेक्स्ट क्लास में
Plus
देखते हैं
level,
इसको.
so GCSE level to complement GCSE Business, and at International EPQ Extended Project to complement the AS and A level qualifications. And students can choose a particular subject and a topic that they are interested in, but it can be based on the qualification that they are being taught. So they could base a project on business, but on a particular subject that they're interested in. So they could do a project on business in sports, for example, or business in music or things like that. And use the knowledge and skills that they've learned in business studies to do an independent project. So we just wanted to bring your attention to that. If we can move on now, Andrew, to the next slide. We do have one question in the chat box. There's nothing at the moment in the Q&A, but the question in the chat box is around A2 units. So in A2 units, they are not split, rather both papers in A2 will cover the complete unit. So Andrew, are you able?
Yeah. So I think we addressed that earlier. So basically, at the final stage in that final year at A2, we're taking an integrated view of business. So what happens at A2 is that the material is assessed, the same material is assessed, but in different ways on paper 3 and paper 4. So paper 3 is case studies, paper 4 leads to a report writing, kind of business report, but the content is, we can pull on the same content for both papers. So GCSE, AS, different content for each paper. A2, we're becoming integrated and both papers assess the same content. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Andrew. That's clear to me. And just to reiterate to everyone, if you do have any questions, then please do add them to the Q&A. You can put them in the Q&A now. We will keep the webinar open for a few minutes after the webinar finishes, so we can address any questions. And as I say, within a week of the webinar finishing, you will receive the full recording, and any questions that have been added to the chat box or the Q&A, if they're not answered during the webinar, we can make sure they're answered when we follow up with the recordings. So we have actually just received another question. We would be needing workshop for paper marking. So we can come on to that now. So I can answer that question for you, Sarah. So the support plan for the business studies qualifications, our support is developed into 3 areas. So firstly, focusing on planning, which is where we are now with the Prepared to Teach qualification, Prepared to Teach webinars. We offer those for all subjects and qualifications. You can also access these recordings anytime. So anyone that's signed up for this webinar or attended, you will receive the recording. They're also available on our website, so you can access them to review later at a later date if needed. And the second tranche of our training is focused on teaching. So in September, we will run Getting Started webinars for all qualifications, which focus in more detail on what you need to do to start teaching the qualification. And then throughout the year, we have a teacher toolkit for certain subjects that will go through and have specific guidance documents to help you teach the qualification. In terms of assessing and answering Sarah's question, the marking guidance webinars we run in November would help with guidance for how to mark the papers. So those webinars in November are really, really useful to help you understand how examiners like Andrew mark the examination, mark the papers, and on what standard we are looking for. So
yeah, and just to chip in there. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So you know those would be very useful sessions. But what I would stress is, you know, our approach is this levels of response approach. We read we look at a question, we agree what the demands of that question are, and then basically we read it and we say, did it do it well? Did it do it reasonably? Did it do it limited? So you know we can learn. You can learn how to mark a 9-mark analysis question very, very quickly because the grid remains the same. So AS, every paper, section B has 3 analysis questions. Top level is 9 to 7, middle level is 6 to 4, bottom level is 3 to 1. Is it good? Is it reasonable? Is it limited? And then we apply that mark scheme. So I think you're going to, you know, I'm going to say joy might be the wrong word, but getting to grips with that assessment is relatively straightforward, and it means that you and students understand really early how you're assessed, and it's consistent in the use of levels of response. There's no kind of strange rules and things going on in the background.
thank you, Andrew, that's helpful. So I just put a link in the webinar chat to the training and events section of our website. So if you do want to find out more about the training and events that we offer, you can find out through the website. So finally, I just wanted to say thank you very much for attending this International GCSE and A-Level Business Studies webinar. If you could take a few minutes to complete the short feedback survey and tell us what you enjoyed, what was particularly helpful, that would be really useful. If you do so, you will receive a digital e-badge noting your attendance at the session today. You can either scan the QR code that's on the next slide, or I will also place a link to the survey in the chat box. So thanks again to everyone who's attended the session. Thanks in particular to Andrew for presenting a really informative webinar. We wish you all the best in your upcoming teaching and marking, and please remember that all the slides and a recording of the webinar will be sent to you within 1 week of the session ending. So we will close the webinar now, but we will leave we'll finish the webinar now, but we will leave the session open for a few moments. So if you do have any additional questions you want to put in the Q&A, you can do so. But you will receive the slides within a week of this session finishing. So
Thank you, everybody.
very much.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your teaching.